Hello and welcome to a brand new Arseblog Arsecast right here on arseblog.com. How are you? Hope you're well. Thank you very much indeed, as always, for being here. We're still in August. The transfer window is still open, and we're awaiting more movement inwards and outwards. Day by day, the arrival of Mikel Merino from Real Sociedad gets closer and closer. We're accelerating, we're inching, we're getting towards the finish line, all of those things. And I'm pretty sure that his arrival will be announced within 2 or 3 transfer windows. Certainly. Within that time frame, I'm confident Mikel Merino will be an Arsenal player. I kid, sort of. But man, it's taking its time, isn't it? Is it dependent on Eddie Nketiah going to Nottingham Forest or somebody else leaving like Reiss Nelson? I don't know. But what we can say for sure is that he is not going to be available for this weekend's game against Aston Villa. So I think it's one of those things that if it develops over the next day or two or over the weekend, maybe we see him for the Brighton game before we go into the first interlull of the season. It's bullshit, isn't it? We've got 2 games that we haven't even got 2 games in, and we're already talking about an interlull. But look, that is the future. There's nothing we can do about it. We're just going to have to cross that particular bridge when we come to it. For now, though, I think we should just have a chat about some of the other bits and pieces that are going on. A couple of transfer stories. Like I said, there is Merino, there is Eddie Nketiah, there's a story about Charlie Patino heading to Spain. So why don't we talk about that and a bit more besides? And with me to do that, it's a pleasure to welcome back for the first time this season, Clive Palmer. Hello, Clive.
Hello, Andrew. How are you, young man?
I'm all right. I'm going. We're into the season now, so everything's revved up and going,
Yeah, we spent some time together this summer, didn't we?
We did, yeah.
LA?
I learned a lot about you, I have to say, but I won't tell the listeners. It's
I learned that no matter how many steps you do, it does not cover the sins of margaritas.
Yes, that is the important lesson to take away from this summer. But look, we'll talk about what's going on with the team and with the first game and all that in a few minutes. But I want to start with a story that involves a youth player, a very, very highly rated youth player at Arsenal. People talked about Charlie Patino in sort of almost not reverential, but with a lot of expectation. I think it's fair to say that he is or was a player that many people had tipped to make the grade. And of course, he scored, I think, on his debut, did he? When he came on, was an FA Cup game and scored on his debut. And has had a couple of loan spells, went to Blackpool, went to Swansea. It didn't quite work out for him. And then this summer, when Arsenal needed to bolster their squad with academy players because a lot of the senior players weren't available for the US tour, he wasn't involved at all. And I think, the writing was very much on the wall for him there. He has been linked with, and I think it's expected to go through, a £1 million move to Deportivo la Coruna, which is an interesting one. Obviously, his family connections to that part of Spain. His dad is a Depor fan, so that's a nice thing in that regard. But I know he's a player that you certainly had a bit of insight into because of where he came from Luton to Arsenal. And I think it's really interesting to look at young players like this and try and assess, that gap that exists between what they're capable of and what people expect from them at youth level, and then doing it at senior level in the men's game against big grown-up, brutish guys who kick you all over the pitch rather than playing against players of your own age. It is a fascinating thing because so many young players have come through and been tipped for the top and never made it. And they've gone on to have careers to various levels, but that jump is still so big, isn't it?
It is. I live in an area where the 3 closest academies are Stevenage, Milton Keynes and Luton. And I just happened to catch him when he was young at Luton, about to go to Arsenal. And he was playing like 2 years up and he was like running the game, Andrew, one of those things. And you thought, when he goes to Arsenal, it's going to be exciting. And the trajectory seemed to be exciting all the way through, very European style in a sort of an English environment, and he's very good on the ball. And he grew in the right way. Maybe always struggled with a bit of mobility and pace, but, you think, well, when he gets older, that will come. But then the loans didn't quite work. Yet obviously everyone knew about him when he had made his debut for Arsenal. I mean, everyone knew about him. And the loans didn't quite work. And this is the jeopardy, isn't it? You go to a loan and the manager changes and he doesn't fancy you. You spend 6 months sitting on your backside and you don't develop. And you can knock me down with feather. I was convinced he would be the right type of player to get into Arsenal's first team. But maybe the right type of player to get into Arsenal's first team 5 years ago. Or closer to like 3-4 years ago. I think that's the difference. And where we are right now, he's just not quite a fit. And where he is in his physical maturity and maybe, just game experience, it just hasn't quite happened. There's always been a feeling potentially that his game was suited to another league. And then we should now find out. Maybe the loans, rather than to go to a championship and the lower leagues to toughen him up per se, should have been to go to Spain or to Italy to really develop on his strengths and see what we could develop there. And also in that environment, he's in the shop window for teams that are looking at players like him. So, and you never know what goes on in these conversations, but he was a sure thing that hasn't quite worked out. And it does tell you that we don't know everything about development and the path that people will take.
No, I mean, the fee is £1 million, I think, which, sounds very low, particularly in the context of the English market. And I'm sure if there had been championship interest in him, there might have been a few extra quid. Maybe there was championship interest, but he's chosen to go to the club that his dad supports and, like you say, go to a different league. And I think there's something admirable about going abroad. I know he's going to be relatively comfortable there, given his background and family connections to there. But still, to go to a different league and a different lifestyle, different environment, different kind of football, I think there's something admirable about that. And Deportivo, are a club that's had a lot of financial issues over the years, which is why probably the fee is as low as it is. But you would imagine that Arsenal have inserted a fairly significant sell-on clause. So if things do work out for him and they sell him down the line, whether it's to another club in Spain or to England again, then we should benefit from that point of view. And I think if if everybody's of the opinion that it's not going to work for a player at a football club, some kind of compromise, if that's the right word, on price with regards to their departure, particularly if they're a player that hasn't quite made the breakthrough at first team level, is really necessary. And then you maybe bank on these clauses down the line to bring you the benefit financially that you think you maybe could have got in a shorter term deal.
Yeah, I think it's a smart way of doing business, actually. Make the price go low, give the player a chance to play, make him attractive to the right club for him, and then make sure the sell-on clause is like 30%, whatever it is. And then you're paying for someone else to develop you. You're getting paid, for another team to develop that player for you. So I think it does make sense. And it's not the only one this year. I mean, there's a player, is it called Mark McGuinness this year, that has just been sold to Luton for 10 million, and we've got a couple of £1 million coming for him that I completely forgot about, I'll be honest with you.
Yeah.
And so, also I think Brooke Norton-Cuffy went to Genoa this summer. Yeah. And another few quid there. So I think there's maybe an identity developing around the youth side of things and what we do. I don't think we're there yet because we've still got a couple of tribunals ongoing at the moment, but I don't think we're there yet. But I can see something that looks like a plan. If it doesn't work out at Arsenal, then this is what we're going to do from here on in. Yeah.
Like the perception of what you produce at youth level, as your first team gets better, I think, your youth players become a bit more valuable, sort of like a rising tide lifting all boats in that regard. But I do think you're right as well that we have, we've sold Brooke Norton-Cuffy, we've sold Micah Beerith. He went, 4 million here, 3.5 million there, sell-on clauses here, sell-on clauses there, where your academy is beginning to generate you some money. And let's not forget that we had an academy player leave for a fairly substantial fee this summer in Emile Smith-Rowe as well. So, what the academy is producing and what it's bringing into the club financially is really important. And I think it's also worth broadening this discussion out, when we think about these young players, and there have been so many, like you could rattle off a list of names from J. Emmanuel Thomas to Arturo Lupoli, all these guys who did so much at youth level, and everyone's like, this is the guy, he's going to be the next guy. Yeah. We're in a situation right now where we've got our star player, Bukayo Saka, is an academy graduate, and he is a very rare gem, I think, but also Eddie Nketiah, Emile Smith-Rowe, as I mentioned, Reiss Nelson, guys who have taken that step and maybe proven not to be quite what we want or what we need, but who have bridged that gap. And I think as much as we're maybe invested in something new at this point, I think you have to give those guys some credit for making that breakthrough and for establishing themselves to varying degrees within the first team, particularly under Mikel Arteta.
Yeah, I mean, I went to a Lyon game the other week, and Ainsley Maitland-Niles was also playing for Lyon, and the guy on the PA said, "From academy to the first team," and everyone clapped. I thought, that's a great line, from academy to the first team. Andrew, how many people do that journey? Really do that journey?
Yeah.
And have significant appearances for Arsenal. We debate Eddie all the time. I'm sure you do, I do, whether in my head or on live on the podcast. But he's made many appearances for Arsenal and scored 15 goals in the Premier League. He's done it, and he's got an England cap to his name. But I don't look at him as a failure. I just look at him as a massive success that we've just moved maybe beyond him. And he's now going to have a Premier League career playing for another team where his position in that club and his level in that club is higher, and he's going to play most Saturdays. That's a fantastic success story for me.
Yeah.
Same for Smith-Rowe. I'm sure you've seen the little clips coming out of them. You see the smile on his face now he's playing. He looks like a different lad. He's smiling, he's moving. We all wish him to have a week-on-week injury-free time to see where he can really get to.
Yeah.
But I see it completely different. I see it as a real positive. The mantra for the academy should be to produce first-team players, to have careers. We hope they're going to play for us. But the better we get, the less likely that is. Mm-hmm. And when we see them, the ones that are good enough, we should really, really hold on to them as like shining lights.
Yeah, I mean, I think, the Eddie situation, we don't quite know what's going to happen with Nottingham Forest. I don't want to sort of jinx it because he's been on the cusp of a move to Marseille and that didn't work out. I was never particularly convinced there was much in the Bournemouth stuff other than they just sold Solanke and Eddie is a striker who's very obviously on the market. The speed with which they got the deal done for Evan Nielsen from Porto basically said, like, Eddie's there. And, Eddie's in the background. If that doesn't work, we can consider that. But, 168 games for Arsenal. And I think, it's a good number of games. And I don't think he was ever going to be the number one striker. I don't think he was ever going to be good enough to do that. But he's still been there, done that, worn that shirt that many times, represented the club that he supports in a big way. And if he goes on and let's say we get 25, 30 million for Eddie Nketiah, I mean, that's a good story from an Arsenal perspective, not just from the people will go, yeah, well, it's great because, PSR rules mean that we can book all that money for Eddie. Broaden it out, step back. This is a kid who came through the academy and played nearly 200 games, 175 games for Arsenal, whatever it is, and has now been sold for a significant profit. And hopefully he goes on and scores a load of goals for Nottingham Forest in 36 games of every season. That's a good story.
It's a great story. And there's a couple more that are out there. Well, one more in Reiss Nelson. See what happens there.
I want to ask you about him. What would you... If you're Reiss Nelson's agent or manager or personal advisor or whatever it might be, what would you be saying to him this summer?
I would be saying to him, go and play, son. Go and play some football. Seriously, go and play. Don't just get yourself out there and go and play where a team really want you. I just think it's so important. They spend years, Andrew, getting to this level. Years. And the sacrifices they make, not doing their schooling at the same level and not going out and we see them up close and there's no takeaways going into these lads. You know what I mean? There's no margaritas going in, and they have to really sacrifice to be at this level. And when you get a chance to play, you've got to take it. I just feel, I hope he looks at his situation and says, I haven't played enough football. I've done my bit for Arsenal. I'm well paid. I've got a good contract, which is the base from which I can negotiate my next contract from. Go and play some football and see what you can do. Again, Arsenal fans will be always supportive of players like that who've done so much for us. Gave me one of the best moments of my life, that kid did, and he'll never be forgotten in the club. So it's all about playing. Otherwise, you just don't know how good you are. You just don't find out unless you play. Minutes are so important.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think, he's going to be 25 in December. And the game can pass you by. The game can pass you by really quickly. If you become ensconced as like a bit part player for a big club, I mean, you always have that little bit of profile, but I think the longer it goes on like that, the less likely other teams are going to be prepared to take a chance with you. Like, he started one Premier League game in 4 years. So if I'm advising Reiss Nelson, sorry, I'll do that. So if I'm advising Reiss Nelson, it is, go and play. And if I'm advising Arsenal, it's do kind of what you did with Charlie Patino, like compromise on the fee. Don't expect a big fee for Reiss Nelson because, respectfully, Reiss Nelson hasn't done a lot to command a big fee. But for his sake, and I think for the sake of his career, he's at a point where he has to play. I was just writing about Miguel Aziz this morning. You'll remember all the talk about Miguel Aziz.
I was sure about him as well, Andrew.
Yeah, lots of people were. Lots of people were calling for him to be given a chance in midfield at various points when things weren't going great under Mikel Arteta. He was transferred to the Spanish semi-pro league last January. He now doesn't have a club, and he's 21 years of age. The game passes you by really quickly. And I think for Reiss Nelson, it's obvious that he's not going to be starting a lot of games for Arsenal. So go and play. And Arsenal facilitate that move, even if it means a low transfer fee, add on the clauses, add on the sell-on clause. And if he goes supernova somewhere else and someone's prepared to pay a big fee for him, we get our dues. Yeah. But for now, just go and play.
Go and play. We'll have a deal linked to appearances. You imagine it, Andrew. You're trying to work out if you're in the team, and then all of a sudden the standards go up, and you're trying to work out if you're in the squad, if you're gonna get a kit, and that must be soul destroying if you're in the squad or not. Another signing or two, he's not in the squad.
He wasn't in the squad for, I think, 8 of the last 10 games of last season. The business end of the season, he didn't even make the squad.
Yeah, that's got to get to your head, mentally. It's got to affect your confidence. So for me, a new page where someone really likes you, they know why they like you and the role you're going to play in their squad, that's got to be the priority. Absolutely got to be the priority, because your ability to perform is only supported by what's going on between the ears. If you feel good about yourself, then there's a great chance that you can show the ability you've been training for 10, 15 years.
Yeah. And I think the other side of this is, again, without getting ahead of ourselves, there are a couple of young players coming through at Arsenal right now who are more the future than Reiss Nelson is.
They are. And they've got upside, right? We saw them, didn't we? We saw them close, didn't we? We can get a chance to see not just what they do when the ball arrives, but what they do off the ball, how the other players talk to them, how they trust them. And we're a bit wise, right? We can see they're building their trust in the group. They're well looked after by all the coaching staff, all the other players. And it's not a charity at this level of football. You've got to have it, right? You've got to have it ability-wise. You've got to have it mentality-wise. You've got to have the right personality to sit in the group. You've got to show the same work ethic as all the top pros at Arsenal. You've got to do the extras. You've got to do everything that they're doing. And, we can't see everything, but we can see the end result on the grass, and their ability is clear, and I don't want to say they're going all the way, but they look pretty comfortable amongst that group, don't they?
Yeah, they do. I mean, they've got the potential. Again, it's difficult to, difficult to really properly gauge how it's going to go for a youth player, because they need some things that are on their side. They need opportunity as well.
Yeah.
You remember Ashley Cole, for example, was a huge beneficiary when Silvinho all of a sudden one day was at Arsenal and the next day, for whatever passport reason that was, he was not. And that provided the opportunity for Ashley Cole. You know, those things, though, you need those doors to open along the way. But you know, I think you have to recognize when you're getting to 24, 25, that moment may well have passed for you. And I think that could be the case with Reiss Nelson. There's not much happening in terms of transfer stuff, but the Merino deal looks like it is crawling over the line. We're edging closer and closer and closer, and talks and blah blah blah. But you know, we'll get there, and I think we will get there in the end. But
We've watched all the comps now, haven't we, mate? We've watched all the comps. We've seen all the clips. We can see the fit. We're picking teams in our mind, and when it first broke, that transfer, I think, that looks interesting. That's not like Arsenal to go 28, but then you look at it and you think, okay, let's have a think. And it does sort of fit. I feel when we first think about him, maybe some people weren't so excited, but then you see him play, you think, actually, the way he plays, the rhythm by which he plays, the sort of core competencies that he brings around duels and aerial play and his size and physicality, we sort of add it up in our minds and we think, oh, we can play there. Then we start to think about the rest of the first 11. And it makes a lot of sense about where we're going, you know, and I like the idea of it. I think since Havertz has come into this team, has played centre forward, particularly in 2024, I think I don't know if we've lost a game hardly, maybe one game that he's played centre forward in. And so to allow that to be more of a regular occurrence, I think is a priority here. And to get somebody that plays like Havertz maybe could have played if he was played in midfield a bit more, makes a bit of sense. And also, Andrew, doesn't block the pathway for the two young players that we were talking about just a minute ago. Yeah. It just leaves a little bit of room for flexibility and to not discourage those young players, to say that we are thinking of you. We're not buying a 23-year-old, we're buying a 28-year-old. Yeah. And we are thinking of you, and your pathway is still clear. So it does make a lot of sense. Like many of the moves recently make a lot of sense. Once we see them, they look really good. Yeah, I mean, it does make you think a lot about Declan Rice as well and where he's going to play. And, you know, I watched, obviously, the game against Wolves at the weekend, and to see Declan Rice cramp up, you know, with 10 minutes to go is really unusual because of, you know, how impressive he is physically and his ability to run and just keep running and keep running. Yeah. And you obviously think about the summer and you think about the very truncated break that he has had since the end of the Euros, you know, in that final with England, same with Bukayo Saka, and the physical impact, the way that manifested itself in the game against Wolves. And I think the arrival of Merino will see Declan Rice play deeper. I think he's going to be a 6 more than an 8 this season when Merino plays, at least. Maybe, But I did wonder as well about our ability to, or the necessity to, think about players like Rice, like Saka, like Saliba, who went the distance in the Euros, who've been asked to come back and go again straight away because we've got a tough start to the season, because we've got Villa on Saturday, we've got Brighton at home. There's an international break then where they'll be, you know, run into the ground again, and then, you know, all of these games. But at some point, you know, they must have it in their minds that we've got to be able to sit Declan Rice down for a few games. We've got to be able to sit Bukayo Saka down for a game or two along the way. Maybe even William Saliba, as horrible as that sounds when you think about an Arsenal first team going out there without William Saliba, but part of how you're going to manage the fitness and the physical capacity of these guys. If you can't give them the break during the summer, you have to be able to give them a break at some point during the season, right? Yeah, I think they're going to be on individual schedules, Andrew. I think Arteta he said the word schedule, you know, and straight away my mind ran away and said, oh, there's going to be a few Dubai trips for these individual players when it really matters, right? Or when it works for them. But that start is so tough. We couldn't afford to do what Man City did at the weekend, which was, so many players not in or on the bench, or Rodri not even in the squad, right? So they're taking a slightly different approach there. I think, my thoughts about player welfare and too many games. I think it's a major problem, but it's not going to change. So we have to have a robust squad, and we have to look after our players individually and make sure they're getting those weeks off when they really need it. I just feel we're heading to a pathway really that, I think as fans, us fans, what we have to get comfortable with is the first 11 changing on a regular basis and changing for maybe a reason you're not aware of. I don't think we're comfortable when the team is not where it's at. When Man City have to make changes, I think they manage those slight imperfections better than us within their team. When we don't have key people in key positions, I think the drop-off in our performance and the drop-off in our fan confidence is too big. We need to be more confident in the support crew, and they need to feel more confident. And I think historically, some of that's quality-based, Andrew. Could we be speaking about some of the players that are going to be going now? And when a couple of them came on against Aston Villa, I didn't see the quality go up. Remember in that home game this year? I didn't see the quality go up. But we have to get to that point when we are comfortable. We don't have the Twitter madness when a certain player is not playing on a certain game, that we're comfortable with it. And then the group has its own confidence and own way of playing. I do feel as a fans, our psychology needs to slightly be different, away from having the perfect first 11 all the time. Because we had a pretty good first 11 at Bayern Munich away last year, but they were tired. They were tired, and there was nothing in the tank when it really mattered in the last quarter of that game. So having players on the pitch make you feel comfortable, but where are they performance-wise? Where are they fatigue-wise? That's the key thing, to have these players peaking at the right time of the season.
Yeah, I think you're right, though. It is quality-based. It is a case of, I'm happy for Mikel Arteta to rotate, but it depends who he's rotating in and who he's rotating out. If it's not Kai Havertz playing up front, but it's Gabriel Jesus, with all due respect to Eddie, I feel more comfortable with that scenario than Eddie, in a game where it's not Kai Havertz, because I think maybe Jesus is just slightly more adaptable in terms of what he brings to that centre-forward position. If it's not Bukayo Saka on the right, but it's Reiss Nelson, I understand why there's some reservation in that sense. So it is about quality, and it is then about becoming comfortable with the options that we have, which, on that basis, I think if when Merino gets done, if it's this week, if it's today, if it's tomorrow, whatever it is, it leaves the club about a week to do something else. There does seem to be a direct correlation between players going out and players coming in. The one in, one out, whether that's, strategy, philosophy, whatever you want to call it, that seems to be the way things are working. And it might be a case that this is maybe a consequence of spending 100-odd million on Declan Rice last summer and 60 million on Kai Havertz and 40-odd million on Jurriën Timber, that someone has to pay the piper along the way, right? The owners are not benevolent in that sense. They want to balance the books as much as possible. But does that leave you still with a desire to see something more in terms of a forward addition, an attacking addition?
Yeah, so obviously the transfer market's been a bit slow. So in my mind, I've been thinking, okay, so where are we at the moment? So do you remember last year, Andrew? I think we played Forest first game. I think Fulham might have been second game. And I was thinking back to where we were. So obviously Havertz came in and he was struggling a little bit at the initial phase, and so we were trying to assimilate him into the team. Declan Rice seemed to settle quite quickly, but he's still new for him. So, trying to, there's a lot of sideways and backward passes while he was settling into the team. So then we obviously lost Jurriën Timber in the first game. So that's one of our full signings gone. And then we had the spectre of David Raya sitting around just about to join the club, just joined the club, and how that made us all feel regarding it and not quite understanding that move at the time. And really, if we look at the season as a whole, that first phase of the season, when we were settling down, was a key part of the season. Now 2024 now, we've settled down and we have something. And what have we done? So we've got Calafiori coming in to give us a level of depth and quality that we've all seen. Jurriën Timber, well, mate, we watched him, didn't we, in the summer? Crikey.
Mm-hmm.
He looks ready to go. Havertz is settled now. Reiss is settled now. And the goalkeeper's got full appreciation from everybody and made a match-winning save in the last game. So we have, well, sorry, I missed out a couple. Gabriel Jesus got his cheekbones back, running around, sprinting around, looks really fit, looks really sharp. So we're managing to grow this from a really stable base. So the quality discussion I was having a little bit earlier, I think we've added quality. Now we need to add a bit more, just a little bit more. And the one bit, mate, that I'm worried about is that forward quality, that extra forward that could maybe give us a level of penetration, a level of dynamism that we're so reliant on Bukayo Saka to produce for us. You know, first game of the season, 3.5 weeks after Euro final, you turn up and he's ready to go. Not only ready to go, I think he's improved. He's getting into better positions. He's striking the ball. He's brilliant, whether in passing or crossing or shooting. He looks enthused like it's his first game of his life. And how do you supplement that? It's very, very difficult. But we need to try to find a way because we have responsibility for that young man and he can't play continuously. So we are, I think, it's to make us all feel comfortable, but I must admit, I've always felt we win one or two players short my entire Arsenal life. But to make us feel comfortable, I do think if we sign Merino and there's one more forward, I think most of us, I don't want to talk for everybody, but most of us say, okay, that's okay. Let's go now from this position, given our newfound stability in the other areas.
Yeah, I think I would feel a lot more comfortable. I mean, I think this is obviously a very good team. That we had a question from our Discord from Rendition 101. He said, given the very tough start to the season, why do you think we're leaving it so late to get transfers done? Can we really afford to play Villa and Brighton with no new signings? And look, we have Calafiori and we have Jurriën Timber, who is like a new signing. Not a new signing, but like a new signing. And, you know, my thought when I saw that question was, well, I think we can afford to play Villa and Brighton because I think the team that we have, even if we didn't beat Villa last season, I think this is a team that is capable of beating Villa, and it is a team that's capable of beating Brighton because we did that twice last season as well. Would we all feel more comfortable with an extra signing or two? 100%. No question about it. But I think what we have is capable of that. The bigger question, the broader question is, do we have sufficient depth over the course of this season with Premier League, with Extended Champions League, with EFL Cup, with FA Cup to do what we want to do? And I kind of feel like we're missing something. I think the midfield piece we've just talked about is coming, but something else in that forward line is what would make me certainly feel a bit more comfortable about our ability to not just have depth, but maybe have a different string to our bow, a different way to impact games that we need to impact at periods where maybe it's not going our way. Maybe it is that game away at Villa Park last season where we're huffing and puffing and we're playing all right, but we aren't quite capable of making that breakthrough. That sort of forward or attacking option from the bench, and obviously you're looking for somebody who can start games as well, but just that ability to not do what Arsene Wenger did, which was like, right, we're losing, let's throw on all the forwards and just really give the opposition something to think about. I'm not saying it's the most tactically it's pretty easy to do that, right? But I just think to look at the bench and think, oh, they've got more. Like if they're hanging on the last 15 minutes and we're piling on the pressure, and then they look at the bench and they see some guy come off and they're like, oh, we've got to deal with this again now. Yeah, you know,
got to beat them again.
Yeah, exactly. That's it.
There's two ways to look at this, right? And I've been, as you know me, I've been thinking about this, right? So I think what we've seen, even in a couple of friendly games, particularly Lyon game, and even the Wolves game, I've seen us attack the box in different ways, Andrew. Really attack the box. Different players, when they see the box, they're going. They're forgetting the shirt number on their back. They're going in. And this is really good because I've had this feeling that, why do I like Bukayo Saka so much? Well, the reason why I like him, I think he wants to run through lines and really threaten the back line. But does anyone else really do it? Have we got a team of players that play in the pocket, want to receive it, knock it off, then move? I think we need more people. It doesn't matter if it's your style to receive it to feet. Run into the box. Run through into the box. Cause distraction. And we saw some back post approaches in both games, particularly the Lyon game. So the way you approach the box is a way you can coach extra goals into your team. And I can definitely see more flooding in the box, more running through lines, which I'm really encouraged about. Because when I was thinking about a forward signing, it was that ability I was looking for without thinking we could add it into our own players. I want to see a dynamic, probably wide forward that wants to run through. So when he comes on, people think, well, I can't squeeze up. I've got to watch the space around me. I've got to watch the space around me. And I think that threat is really key. I've got a couple of names, but I have a couple of names every day, mate, to be honest with you. I watched Brighton at the weekend and a young man called Adingra, and I thought he was absolutely fantastic. And his ability to not just run through, but arrive in the box and finish with real ferocity, wants to get into the central areas. I thought, I'd like to see you at Arsenal. And then there's a link this morning to Rafinha, a little small link. I'm like, I like you as well. So I change all the time. But just those two names alone make you think, interesting. Interesting. Do we go young and try to build him? Or do we say, actually, how about we do a loan with a more experienced player that's ready-made, has a role to play in the team right now? I like that idea too, so it'll be very interesting to see what we do, because there seems to be a little bit of financial opaqueness, shall we say, not just for now, but potentially in a year or so's time. Where are we? I don't understand it enough, but I think there's been such conservatism, not just with Arsenal, but other teams. It's almost like they're preparing themselves for something, and I'm just not sure what that is. But I like how we've approached this window, Andrew. I really do. It seems sensible, But the next move, the next one, if you get Merino, is the one that really interests me the most.
Yeah. I mean, I was talking to Adrian Clark on last week's Arsecast, sort of previewing the season, and he was talking about bringing in a sort of a young player who could come in and not compete necessarily with Bukayo Saka, because I think Saka is, on his own island in a way when it comes to this team and the manager's faith in him. But it might be the easiest way. Whereas if you do, let's say, take advantage of Barcelona's financial issues and say, well, we'll give you X amount for Rafinha, I think with a senior player, there's also an expectation of involvement, which becomes more difficult. I mean, it doesn't mean to say that it becomes a huge issue, because we've seen with someone like Leandro Trossard, who was starting every week for Brighton. He was that good. He was starting every week for Brighton. But when he has come to Arsenal, despite the contributions, he's sort of in and out of the team, and he's used in specific ways. And he's got that young player in Martinelli to sort of battle off with. But it does become, when you have a player who's as good as Saka, it becomes so difficult, doesn't it, to try and find the right profile of guy to be the person in the squad who kind of knows, well, in a big game, I'm not going to play. When everyone's fit, I'm probably not going to play. That is a difficult thing.
It is, and I think maybe a young player is a good idea. And I like Tadinga. I think Adrian mentioned a player called, was it Bakayoko you mentioned, who we played against last year. He did really well against us in the Champions League games. And he's very quick, but he's also, Andrew, he's very strong, so he can receive it back to goal. Much like, and we build up through Saka, and his strength is underestimated, isn't it, by defenders. He rolls in, he rolls off them and rolls inside. Bakayoko can do the same type of thing. And so it's a very smart, Adrian's a smart guy, right? It's a very smart pick, and I think he's on my list. I think the Bournemouth winger as well, is Semenya. I quite like him as well. I'm not saying he's a gettable, but it just makes you think, Bukayo Saka's so good, who wants to come and sit and carry his wash bag? It's tough, isn't it? It's tough, but we need that level of player to come in. Otherwise, we're not going to get where we need to get to, I'm afraid. It's just not going to happen. We are going to fatigue out. I think from after the national break till January, we play every 3 or 4 days. So there's no escape. It's coming, right? So there is no weeks off, right? So this time, how we manage that is going to be really important.
Is that one of the big challenges for Arteta this year? The need to rotate, and I thought it was really interesting when he talked about we can't expect Ben White, William Saliba, Gabriel to play every game. We were lucky last season; they were fit and ready for most Premier League games. We're not going to be able to do that again. Yeah, I think he's sort of got to find confidence with himself to make changes from game to game. Because, like, anytime I think of any Arsenal game, if I'm picking the team, like, the first two names on my team sheet are William Saliba and Gabriel.
Yeah,
because as a partnership, I mean, it's just so good. And I think their presence in the team says something to the opposition. As much as it says about, what you're going to do and the way you're going to play, there were and have been fantastic central defensive partnerships in the past. Again, not comparing these players individually, but you knew when you played Manchester United, when they had Ferdinand and Vidic, that's going to be fucking tough, and there are other clubs, and I don't want to give any credit to other clubs for what they fielded down the years, but title-winning teams, the other side of London perhaps, had some central defensive partnerships. When you looked at them, even if you thought they were terrible people, you went, that is going to be tough. You know who I mean, and everyone listening knows who. No, exactly. But there are going to be occasions where he is going to need to change things up and be confident in his ability to give Jurrien Timber a game at right back, maybe Jurrien Timber a game at centre half, as we saw during the summer. He was playing as the right-sided centre half. Calafiori in for Gabriel, maybe Calafiori in at left back in certain games. Yeah. And I find that a really interesting aspect to this season, because I think the defensive foundations have been such a big part of what Mikel Arteta has done, right? He's put together this collection of defenders and found these partnerships that work. I'm sure people will laugh, but they'd be like, will we sign another forward? Oh no, let's bring in another central defender. And if we can add another goalkeeper in there, I'll be pretty happy.
We've
got that coming, with the Ramsdale situation. It's sort of the opposite of Wenger, where it was like, we really need a centre half, and he buys Andre Arshavin. That was just Wenger's way, and I think Arteta's way is his own way, and it's been successful. But trusting himself to make those changes to things that have been foundational is going to be fascinating.
Yeah, I saw Calafiori's debut, and Andrew, when he came on, mate, it's like a wardrobe running onto the pitch. Honestly, he looked so strong, and you couldn't miss him, mate. Honestly, you couldn't miss him. And he's got that presence about him, that last man presence, So if he was last man, you'd feel okay, And we saw Timber play centre back, didn't we? And I thought, that's interesting. But we didn't feel nervous, did we, watching him play there? It was like, so he has that presence. So, a year later, we didn't want Gabriel Saliba to be anywhere else but on the pitch. But if the worst was to happen for a game, we had to play Calafiori and Timber as central defenders. It'll be interesting, wouldn't it, to watch? And if we were to see it, our confidence would grow. Our confidence would grow in the depth of our group. We saw Ethan play in the summer. I've got a level of confidence that in certain phases of a Premier League game, he can play. So we found somebody there. I think it's really important that we find people that can do it. Miles, I haven't seen Miles play midfield for the first team yet, but he looks confident on the ball. He looks strong. And you think to yourself, there's minutes for you in this first team this year. And I think our confidence will grow the more we see this team and the more we see these players. Will Arteta do it? I think year on year, he's improving as a manager. I think he is. I don't disagree with his rotation historically, but I think the quality is better now. And the depth of games is greater. I think if we were to overload certain people and fall down at the most critical times, I think the situation and the feedback would be negative towards that. But you have to see them first, see what they're like, and then make our judgments then, and see how they need to improve and see where he needs to coach them, where if they do need to improve. But at the moment in time, I've got a lot more confidence about this group and their depth and stability. And the stability is key. I think if you look at the teams around us, what's happening at Chelsea, that's not a stable place. right? And, their team is all over the place and their club is all over the place. You see what's happening in Manchester United organisationally. There's been lots of change. They're trying to assimilate a lot of people into that club, lots of new players into that club in different phases. They had a few injuries. So they've got some issues there. Liverpool have been very sensible with keeping the group stable, but the management has changed. The sports science has changed. The analytical side has changed. The whole transfer committee has changed. So there's slight change and instability in that club as well. And it's happening everywhere. But we have something. We have that solidity, and so does Man City. I'm afraid they have it too, right? And that's why people say we're going to be up there. But for us to be up there in multiple competitions, and we do need to lift something this year, it's going to have to be a squad game. No,
for sure.
No excuses. No excuses.
But do you think he is capable of getting more out of enough of these players individually and collectively for us to sort of, I think it's going to be difficult to improve on what we did last season in terms of games won and goals scored and all those kinds of things. Like, each season is unique, so we might not need to win that many games. We might even need to win more. Who knows? But you talked about Saka coming back after 3.5 weeks of a break and looking better, despite the fact he can't be at 100%. It's just not possible for him to be at 100%. Havertz, a guy who I think has improved massively from the time he arrived at the club, and I think there are understandable reasons as to why he came to Arsenal and looked a bit traumatised and shell-shocked, because he'd been at Chelsea during a period where there was a lot of upheaval on and off the pitch, but he looks a lot more settled now, and you are looking at more from players like Reiss, Odegaard, maybe Trossard, Jesus, Martinelli, lots of candidates where you're seeking more on an individual level to give you the benefit on a collective level.
Absolutely, and I don't think any of them have reached their ceilings yet. I don't, in any which way or form. And there seems to be a hunger there, Andrew, in the group. It really does. You can see things you can see what they've been told. When you start seeing, Bukayo Saka taking right foot shots first time edge of the area, he's been told, we've got to shoot more. We stop having touches around the box. Take your shots. I quite like that. Havertz took an early shot in the game. It didn't look good, but he took it early, right? Yeah. And I quite like that. Again, we're doing things to improve our efficiency in the box, while adding defensive solidity. But I think attacking the box in different ways is so important, with more determination. And there was a period last year, do you remember the Liverpool Cup game when we tried to walk in about 10 times, right? And that can't happen anymore. And once we came back from our break, we became far more decisive in what we're doing in those actions. But when it comes down to it, I have regrets about our efficiency in the box. I do. I have regrets about key chances. Watching the Champions League game back and seeing the half chances we had, you've got to take them. You've got to take them. The other teams would do that. Real Madrid do that. Bayern Munich did that against us. Take the half chance. Make it count. Make your dominant periods count, and then control the state of the game. This is the next phase for us. I think I listened to an Aston Villa guy this morning online, and he was talking about them going through the Champions League and how excited they are. Do you remember how we felt last year for that first game? How excited we were for that first game? We played Spurs at the weekend. It sort of drained us emotionally. We got a 2-2 against them. We should have beaten them. We're used to this course now. We understand it. We may not be as excited about the Champions League games, but we may be able to get through them without that emotional drain. Knowing the course is really important. I'd forgotten what a quarterfinal Champions League night felt like.
Yeah, well,
and managing that week with Villa there. Remember that week with Villa? I'd forgotten, mate. I've got to be honest with you, but now I won't forget. And I don't think the team or the management will, and they'll be better for that experience, about how they can cope with it.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing what Europe brings this time around, because, well, obviously the format is new. Whether you think it's better or worse, it's new, and it's what we've got to deal with. 8 games minimum, and that is going to absolutely test the squad to its fullest level, because you are going to have to rotate. You are going to have to keep players fresh. You're going to be playing every 3 days. There is going to need to be that level of keeping legs fresh and everything else. Potentially against some very, very good teams in Europe, and maybe we get a nice draw and there's a couple of teams that aren't so good and you can rotate a bit more easily. But, this is where I think, that first season back in the Champions League last year, we went out to Bayern Munich, a big club with such pedigree in the Champions League, went to the quarterfinal stage, which is a step forward after so many years out of the Champions League, and being back in and doing that. Is that all part of the experience that you need to again, going back to this individual collective improvement, to take those experiences and just sort of finally, really, because we've talked numerous times about how this is an Arsenal team that has responded to things not going well for them, not achieving what they wanted at the end of the season when we lost out to Newcastle that time and missed top four and missed out on the title a couple of seasons ago and came back and really pushed even harder. It's so difficult to maintain that. Like, every time something goes wrong, you can't always come back better, but I think that is going to be the target for this season. So between all of what we went through last season in Premier League and then what we learned from the Champions League, this should be a very confident group, a very confident team, and that goes a long way.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of stuff now together as a group. They've experienced a lot of things. I think the draw for Champions League maybe end of next weekend, I think next Friday. And then you drop those 8 games in. And we'll be talking a lot about how the schedule looks then, won't we? Yeah. We'll be talking about the difficulties. Once we put those games in against league opponents, it's going to be really interesting. And although this start is really, hard, I'm hoping we get a benefit of that in Champions League. That is, maybe the weeks are not so hard. I mean, it's a very difficult start to have Spurs away, Villa and City. Very difficult. And Brighton are not stupid, are they? So they all bring a level of quality into us. So I think that schedule will really dictate how we feel about the season as a whole. But my view is knowing the course, mate, doing it before. It's like when I go walking up hills. If it's a new hill, I struggle. Once I've done it a couple of times, I can get up it. I know what's coming. I know the marks. I know what's there. But the first time is awful. It's every step is tough, right? And it felt like that at times last year. It felt draining, some of those games. They need to be more matter of fact, that you're not even thinking about the journey. You're just doing it because that's where you belong. That's where you belong. And we're playing away in Spain. No problem. We just go and win that game. Yeah. And that's what our opponents do. They don't think about it. It's just part of their job. I think we're closer to that now. I haven't seen Arsenal in an 18-game run win 16 and lose 1 and draw 1. Let's not dismiss that. I've not seen that many times, Andrew, I'll be honest with you. But that's the level now. We just dismissed it as if it's matter of fact. Well, we've got confidence that we can do that type of run now. We got that confidence. We didn't have that the year before. So I do think, don't dismiss the experiences that we've had. They're preparing us for what we hope to happen. My only worry, mate, is the journey is adding up to something, isn't it? It's adding up to a destination. And it feels that destination should be this year or at maximum next. Yeah. If it's not this year, it's because something very unfortunate has happened. So the journey has to have a point when you get there, but when I see the squad building, I'm not only am I seeing a squad that can do the now, but prepared for the future as well. And that's what's really exciting. Yeah. You want some tangible reward for the work you put in and for how good you are and how good a team is. Otherwise, there are sections of people who aren't willing to say this was a great team or a very good team because they didn't win anything. And I don't think that's necessarily fair, but I understand, that kind of mindset. Just a final question from our Discord from Simon King. He says, how are you finding the balance between enjoying the football that makes us contenders and actually being contenders and all the dread that comes with it? That's a good question. He's like he read my mind. I think I'll be honest with you, mate, I struggled with it first game. I did. I walked in there and I had the weight of the world on my shoulders. People coming up to talk to me, and I was like, "Yeah, can I just go and sit down for a minute and just read something?" I was like, just nervous. And it shouldn't be like that, right? It's August. It shouldn't be like that, you know.
But why shouldn't it be? Because, you know, I understand completely what you're talking about, that, you know, the levels have raised so high and the bar has been raised so high and expectations have been raised so high that there is no margin for error. So, like, football is just a mad game. You know, sometimes we forget that it's fucking crazy, and that for all the preparation and all the due diligence and all the organization and tactical fucking all of it, sometimes football can be just crazy, and there's nothing you can do to stop the madness unfolding before your eyes. Like, you know, those are things that I find, you know, harder to deal with now. I think maybe as I get a bit older, I think it could be that, you know, and I think you recognize as well that this is a chance, this is an opportunity. You don't get to where we are without it being just a little bit special, and we want to take that next step and win the title. And I'm desperate for it to happen, you know. So I enjoy the football. I like the players. I like the manager. I like what we do. I like how we do it. But at the same time, there is this sort of existential knot in my stomach for every game where you're going, oh, please don't fall victim to the crazy ass nonsense that football can inflict on you.
You know what we said? I like how we do it. That is it in a nutshell. I've really liked how we've done this, how we've got here. You know, I really like it. I really like how we all feel, primarily. You know, we all feel positive. We like this group of people. We like how they're doing it. We like how they play, how they behave. We like it, right? So when you do things correctly, you hope you get rewarded. If you don't get rewarded, so, well, why don't we just buy everybody then and break all the rules? You see what I mean? Yeah. It's like that. So we're doing it the right way, so you hope we can get rewarded. And I think the how is important to me, Andrew. You know, it's very important how we do things, and going to the ground now. I mean, you've been there in recent times as well. The experience is wonderful, isn't it? It's just absolutely wonderful, and it's got no worse, mate. From the first game, I'll tell you that now. Reporting back, and it's got no worse. It's got better. And I just said, Adidas never going to go out of business, mate. Honestly, there's so many shirts being sold. It's ridiculous, and so you just hope that gets to a destination, as I said earlier, and because we have done it correctly. But in the end, it didn't really matter. You know, the grass is green, mate, and we got that ball needs to roll in the right direction. These players need to be sharp, need to produce under pressure, need to learn lessons from last year, be more efficient, control more game states, save their energy, get depth in that squad to give us at least a 2 to 3 trophy approach. Do you see what I mean? That we're competing in 2 to 3 tournaments and competitions, and then see where we are. You know, see where we are. Keep raising those standards, see where we are.
All right. Well, let's hope the grass is sufficiently green and the ball rolls well enough into the back of the Villa net a few times this weekend. Big game. It is for sure. All right. We better leave it there. Clive, as ever, thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed to Clive. You can find him in all the usual social media places at Clive PAFC or some variation thereof. Just do a little search for that. He'll pop up. So this weekend we're looking ahead to a game against Aston Villa away at Villa Park. It is Mikel Arteta and it's Unai Emery. That dynamic is in there. And of course, there is the dynamic of what happened against them last season. We were beaten home and away. And I think there is a measure of revenge required for this weekend. We'll hear what Mikel Arteta has to say about that when he meets the press on Friday morning. After which we will have our usual Premier League preview podcast over on Patreon. You can join myself and Lewis Ambrose to look ahead to the game, talk about the tactics, potential team selection. There might be some injury news that we get from the manager's press conference, and how Arsenal can go about taking all 3 points against the team who dented us last season. You can be quite sure that that is going to be front and centre in the minds of the Arsenal players and the Arsenal manager. So if you would like to join us over on Patreon, you can do that for $6 a month. Or you can pay annually and get 10% off, I think it is. If you pay annually, you can sign up for an annual subscription. It's patreon.com/Arseblog. That's patreon.com/Arseblog. For now, though, I'm going to leave it there. I hope you enjoyed the show. Thanks as always for listening and for being here. And we will catch you on the next one. Until then, cheers. Bye-bye. The year is 2294. Humanity has all been but wiped out. Only a few stragglers remain, desperately fighting the sinister AI overlords that now rule the planet. Deep in the heart of what used to be London, a cache of weapons exists, the only one on the planet sufficient to take down the algorithmic nightmare that controls everything. The future of the human race depends on one man. They call him Saint Sebastian. This summer, experience a journey like no other. Can he overcome the odds and fight the power and make his way to the Arsenal? Merino, coming to a football club near you soon. Maybe.